Hey YouTube! Woo! That was me letting out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I really don't get why that is such a big common thing. Because okay, so I feel like sometimes, we might be like in a time of tension, we might be like clenching our fist or whatever and like holding our breaths, and I don't think that's implausible. But it happens so many times, and often so many times to one character, and I'm just like, guys, why does this keep happening to you? You need better coping mechanisms. This video is my review on Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. It's also my first official booktube review video. Excuse my background, I've got a built-in soundtrack from the folks barbecuing in the adjacent backyards. You might also hear children screaming to emphasize my points, so cool, great. So I think I want to start this by reading the description that's on Goodreads, and then kind of launch from there. They killed my mother. They took our magic. They tried to burn us. Now we rise. Zelia Rebola remembers when the soil of Orisha hummed with magic. Burners ignited flames, tiders beckoned waves, and Zeli's reaper mother summoned forth souls. But everything changed the night magic disappeared. As I'm editing this, I'm getting strong then. Everything changed the night the Fire Nation attacked. Vibes. Under the order of a ruthless king, Magi were killed, leaving Zeli without a mother and her people without hope. Now Zeli has one chance to bring back magic and strike against the monarchy. With the help of a rogue princess, Zeli must outwit and outrun the crown prince, who is hell-bent on eradicating magic for good. Danger lurks in Orisha, where snow leopards prowl and vengeful spirits wait in the waters. Yet the greatest danger may be Zeli herself, as she struggles to control her powers and her growing feelings for an enemy. So, that sounded good to me. Also sounded kind of like typical YA cliche because, feelings for an enemy, but whatever, that's fine. So I read this book twice. I read it when it first came out, and I devoured it. All 17 hours of the audiobook, I devoured. I loved it. I loved the reader. She had different voices for Zeli, Inan, and Amari. Those are the three character point of views. The three narrative perspectives that we get. And I can't speak to how well or not their voices stand on their own. Were I reading it physically, I was gonna say physically in print, and I'm like, bro, that's not even what you do. If I were reading it in Braille, but the narrator, I forget her name, she was really good, and she made their voices distinctive. However, upon a second reread, I started rereading the book last December when Children of Vengeance and Virtue, I believe that's what the second book is called, and normally I don't really reread books, but I figured I'd reread it, and because I loved it so much, like it'd be great. However, there's a reason why many of our professors tell us that we should reread books, or reread whatever we're doing so that we get a deeper understanding and things to that effect. Because on the second reread, what I loved about it was still there. I loved this rich world that was created, and I have seen that a lot of Nigerian natives were not as impressed by her world building, but as an American, I've not been to Nigeria, I've not been to any other countries in Africa. I loved it. I loved the depiction. I loved especially getting a black heroine. I was gonna say non-white, but I've seen like medieval Asian settings, medieval Eastern Asian settings, and medieval Europe is traditional. Well, is that a European term? Okay. Like alternate history Nigeria edition rather than East Asia or Europe edition, which is usually what we're given. And when I also say Europe, I mean like Western Europe. So I was really excited for that. And I still really love that. Because honestly, there was a lot that I could relate to, I loved when she was walking through the market and she smelled jollof rice and she smelled like frying or cooking or however the plantains were being prepared. But Bella Swan and Vasilisa, the main character from Vampire Academy, or not, well, Rose was the main character, but like Lissa, okay, if anyone's read it, you guys know what I'm talking about. But anyway, they weren't talking about plantains, they weren't talking about jollof rice, which, not my particular cultural heritage. I, identify as Afro-Caribbean, but I have had it, and it's delicious, and, I appreciated the blackness that was happening in this book. I saw some reviewers, I'm sorry, it is like so hot, there's a heat wave this weekend, and the crazy thing is, so my fan is okay, like, I have, my legs and arms and everything else is cool, but just not my face. I don't understand, guys, I don't. Crap, what was I talking about? I mean, I know what I was talking about, but I don't remember exactly what I was saying. Okay, well, anyway, so, okay, I do remember. So I saw some reviewers who were upset about the fact that, like, oftentimes their hair was bone straight, and I did see, or I vaguely remember, there seemed to be a correlation with the amount of power you had and how coily / curly / kinky your hair was. And so I thought that was like a cool little like addition. I also thought a magic system based with the Orishas is cool. That's not an area that I really read much about. And, I have taken Afro-Caribbean religion classes and, learned about the base history, all the religious ideas that a lot of the Afro-Caribbean religions come from, learning about the Orishas. And so it was awesome. And this is not my area of expertise, so I won't comment on that. I will say that, I have seen elemental magic used a lot, but I mean, it's nature, it's natural, and so that didn't bother me. What did, upon the second reread, was how YA was. Now, I am 23, YA ends at like 17, but I still read YA novels because that's what I am working on, and I want to, kind of sort of stay in that mindset of that age range, except that's kind of hard because a lot of YA is written by adults, so it's a weird space to be. A lot of YA is also read by adults. There was this article I read that was talking about YA being a genre of a nostalgia for adults rather than what it's meant to be, a genre for teenagers. Like, yes, it started off as YA and it started off for the generation of teenagers in the early 2000s and 2010s, but now everybody wants to take it with them, and it's not really for the current young adults anymore, which is an interesting theory, and I think I do agree with it because there are a lot of people in my age range and older who are reading YA, and sometimes I know they're reading it just to make sure, like, okay, is this book okay for my kid to read? And I think that's great. Be involved in your kid's life, that's wonderful. But yeah, I do feel like that was a point was made. And so I feel like because of I don't want to say that I'm burnt out on YA because I still do enjoy a lot of the stories that I have found. However, I'm burnt out on a lot of the YA tropes. For example, well, okay, so I don't know if enemies to lovers is a particularly YA trope, but I see it a lot in YA. And that can work well, but I didn't really feel it with Zélie, and I feel like it's kind of obvious who the enemy that will be her lover is, but in the interest of not having spoilers, I didn't really feel it. Alright, minor spoiler. It's with Inan. And I didn't really feel it. It was insta-love, and it was unbelievable insta-love. She went from being very much against this person to, defending him against her brother, and it didn't really, like, the shift didn't make that much sense. Now, I'm not disagreeing with giving a person a chance. I think that could have been handled better, but it felt so unrealistic, and sometimes some of the character jumps and character changes felt so unrealistic. Like, what happens in the end, when the enemy turned lover, turns back to enemy, and it's or not enemy, is he doing it for Zélie's best interest? Like, there's so much, and I feel like there are some minor spoilers that it's kind of hard to review a book, I feel, or give kind of in-depth thoughts on a book without giving some spoilers, but I'm going to try. But the character flip-flopping was just so annoying. And so the three narrative perspectives. Zélie, she by turns was like, I'm gonna fight back. We need to, destroy the monarchy. And then it's like, oh, but I'm so unworthy to be the one to destroy the monarchy. But she would also seem like she was very gung-ho to be the one to destroy the monarchy. Does that make sense? And I feel like I get, the complex, this is a chosen one plot, that's another thing. It's a chosen one plot. But I don't think that's inherently bad, especially because there were other people who also had abilities. It's like long, it'll be a lot to explain how exactly that went about happening and all that stuff like that. But, she was the chosen one to make the things happen. She wasn't the chosen one in terms of, magic. She wasn't the only one with magic. So I really did like that. But I felt like she was a kind of selfish character, and I don't think selfishness is inherently bad. I feel like people hear selfish and they're like, that's terrible, you have to be selfless. And I'm like, who's gonna look out for you if you're not looking out for yourself? However, I don't always feel like she thought about herself sometimes in the decision she made. Sometimes it was impulsive. I really appreciated Zayn, her brother, calling her out on her bullshit, because he was the only character who did. Next point of view was Amari, and I really did like her change. She was kind of annoying in the beginning, and it was a little repetitive because Zélie and Amari's narratives tie more closely than the third, Anan. A lot of events were just repeated rather than, I don't really feel like there was much nuance given to it was just summarized, and I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like if their paths had diverged more, it could have been better executed. But I did like what eventually came of their friendship. I did like, the way Amari, I loved her character by the end. There are a few things when I was just like, bro, just kill them. But I understand the turmoil, all of that. I got that. Anon. Duty before self. Duty before self. Duty before self. Duty before self. That was his catchphrase. And I understood why that was a thing. I got it. But it seemed so... at some point, he came off as a child clinging to a security blanket. And I actually understand. I think that was really well done. But with just how everything else played out and just... I don't know, his complete, what happens at the end with his character, I didn't understand. The duty before self, I just wanted to slap the self with the duty. Wait, no, that sounds weird. But no, I think that, my sister loved this book. And I feel like it's because she doesn't read a lot of fantasy and she doesn't read a lot of YA. And so for her, it was just rich world. It was okay, these characters are teenagers, that's fine. But I feel like sometimes we don't give teenagers enough credit. And it could have been better. And on the second reread, it took me months to read. I started in November, I finished it I started in early December, and I finished it maybe a few weeks ago because I just kept putting it down. The last hour of the 17-hour audiobook was honestly one of the best parts.
Because it was the most action-packed. The action didn't really make sense, and it got a little confusing. A character who was left behind earlier just showed up and reappeared. How did you find him? But it was the most action-packed, which made it the best. Also, I think a love triangle was sort of started, kind of. So I hate love triangles, so I really hope that's not the case.
There's a point where Zélie goes through some trauma, further trauma from her childhood trauma, and I thought I did feel that, and I thought that was well done, especially with the author's note in the back. I feel like the author's note was the most touching part. She talks about just the brutality, the police brutality, the treatment of Black people, all valid things, all things that I relate to, but I don't know. I feel like like I said, in the second reread, on a closer inspection of it, it felt like another YA novel, and it had a great setting. For me, at least, it had a great setting, but I feel like the characters fell flat and they didn't help to make the plot better. Some things just seemed to happen conveniently, even though there was hardship and strife that was thrown in. I didn't really feel it this second time. But nonetheless, I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads, and I'm, giving it 3 stars here, telling you guys, because I still feel like it's a book that we need. I feel like, if we can have so much, like, frustrating white YA, we can have some frustrating, like, African-based YA. For the reasons that I just expressed, was not a huge fan of the overall story, or, like, how some things were executed, but I'm happy that the story is there, honestly. I am. There's so many black and brown people, and it was great. I loved that. I loved reading about, like, the coconut shaded folks and the dark skin and the various shades, and I liked that. So I recommend it, but take my recommendation with a bit of salt, because, for the reasons that I expressed. And if you are kind of burnt out on YA tropes, maybe not, but if you also just want to see more just black people in YA, and yes, I know that there is a rise, and this is a thing that is happening more and being seen more, but I also feel like not in this way. Like, I've seen more urban fantasy, whether it's YA or adult, with black characters. I haven't seen too much alternate history settings with magical black characters. Did I just invoke the magical Negro? No, that's not what I meant to do. But yeah, so 3 stars for me. Read it with a grain of salt, but I think that, we need some, like, okay African-based YA, and we need some amazing African-based YA.